Okay, hi, hello everyone. Welcome to our FNC. It's our second FNC. So all of you all can just like put your videos on for now, and we can have a small introduction uh, of FNC compartment S4. And then when we move on to the presentation, then we'll do a screen share. And that time we'll request you all to keep the videos off. Um, so um, yes, so this event, so we organize FNC under Compartment S4 within our many initiatives. Compartment S4 is a collaborative of 8 architects. And we've got different kinds of initiatives running along our practice, which kind of feed into it. I'll ask Aman, one of our co-founders, to just introduce the FNC and Unmute and the other parallel things we are doing along with Compartment S4. So Aman, over to you.
Hi, hello. Hello everyone. I hope you're all well and safe in these difficult times. As Vedanti said, I'll begin by briefly introducing a couple of our initiatives. We started FNC, Friday Night Conversations, a few months back as a platform for architects to discuss and dwell deeper into the pluralities that exist in our architectural practices today. Over a period of time, a studio in Ahmedabad became a small hub where we would just meet and discuss the current scenarios. Given the current global scenario, we've now sort of expanded ourselves to a much larger audience and a much larger variety of people through via Zoom, and we're quite grateful for that. Over time, soon, like we realized the importance and relevance of such a platform, and the kinds of discussions and thoughts that were being generated needed to be documented so that one could further build on the same ideas. So with that in mind, we started Unmute, and an independent publication that aims at curating content around the contemporary architectural discourse of its time. So we're very happy to announce the first 2 editions of Unmute will be out this Sunday, and some very interesting practitioners and researchers, artists and designers have contributed for these issues. Starting this Sunday, a virtual copy of these will be freely available on demand. You can just write to us if you want a PDF or a link to view the same. And we hope to start printing these also as soon as possible. Hopefully once life gets back to a little normal. Also, we have another very exciting news. Compartment S4 is completing 3 years of practice on 11th of May this year. In celebration of the same, we are going to launch our website. We have attempted to create a platform that truly reflects who we are, and we would also sort of love to hear some feedbacks on the same. So I really I would urge you to go and visit the website, check out our work, and also write into us if you have any feedbacks as to what you think about our work, or about the way we sort of reflect ourselves. So yeah, without further ado, I'd request Vedanti to begin the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Aman, for that introduction. Okay, so so this time we are going to be discussing on rural initiatives, and we've got Design Jatra here with us. And I think many of us know the kind of work that they've been involved in. It is very close to some of what we are also doing with the rural landscape in Uttarakhand, and which is why we thought it would be a nice time to get Design Jatra here. We've got Pratik, Vinita, and Shardul, the 3 co-founders of Design Jatra, and 2 of them are actually currently in 2 villages of Maharashtra. So there might be some technical glitches, which we can excuse ourselves for. I'll just introduce Design Jatra. It's a young eco-sensitive architectural practice working towards community-centric development with ecology as their guiding principle for design. Design Jatra nestles itself in the vibrant context of the tribals of the Palghar district. It seeks to develop sensitive and practical solutions for the communities it deals with. Design Jatra represents hope for its founders, its huge team of collaborators, and the local communities in indigenous and sustainable systems. It hopes to expand not as a massive building generating factory, but as a community enterprise which helps contexts emerge as a strong living habitat. So, Vinita, Shardul, I think you guys can now share your screen over to you all. And Pratik, also please unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear us?
Hello. Hi.
Hi. So all of us can now like just stop our video so that we can see three of them, and then we can again switch on our video once they're done.
So,
Vinita, are you sharing the presentation?
no, I can share, Shardul. So I'm sharing the presentation right now.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Just give me a. Sorry. Yeah.
We start.
Yeah. Shardul, you can
Yes.
start.
Okay. So, hello everyone. So this is our first time doing something like this. So yeah, we might be new at it, but whatever. So we thank Compartment S4 for this opportunity, and hope that we'd be able to answer everyone without technical glitches. Because, like she said, two of us are in villages which have network issues. But let's see where this goes. So at least Vinita is in Mumbai and she has good network, hopefully, which will last. Uh, so when we were told to talk about the rural scenario of architecture or the rural context of architecture, uh, we felt it necessary to kind of start with where we were as a practice and what we call as community. So the first slide over here talks about both these things. This is the village that we have our office in, and this is the village where also Pratik lives. So just a uh, short, let's say like a short story of how we began as a practice was me and Pratik. We both belong to this district called Palghar in western Maharashtra, and we both wanted to kind of do something with our district and base ourselves in the district that we belong to. And a lot of friends joined. Vinita, there were other few who joined us in the beginning days, and we all started having these discussions about what can we do, how can we engage with the community over there. We used to travel a lot through the district, and that's when we realized that the ideal place to be if we have to work within the district is this particular village called Veti Murbad. It is almost on the border of Gujarat and Maharashtra, and it's a tribal village of about 57 families, and Pratik's family is one of them. Pratik, can you move to the next slide?
Yeah.
So this is a completely tribal village. Uh, there are the Madhev Koi tribes living there, and so initially we spent about 2 or 3 years kind of documenting what this village was, what we could do in the village, where did we find ourselves in the village, whether as architects we found ourselves relevant or no, and whether uh, in that particular village and that particular context of the whole tribal ethos that we were surrounded with, what interventions could we do to sort of uh, you know be have a symbiotic relationship with the tribals over there, wherein we get to learn from them, we get to help them, as well as we also get our own practice settled with them. So this image actually is from those days when we used to document this particular village which we decided to be part of. And it all started with this village where we sort of understood their rituals, their community, how they used to build, right from building to how they managed their forests, how they farmed, all of these things. So to kind of reach to an understanding of a completely new context, it took us about 2 years, and it was a whole collaborative process where a lot of students, a lot of friends joined to understand the whole thing, because that's something that college did not teach us fully. Though we had guidance of a faculty named Malak sir, who's also our guide through our practice, and he sort of guided through the whole process of documentation. But at the same time, for us to understand this complicated, very different kind of scenario, it took us 2 years to sort of get to know where uh, we were located in the whole scenario. Pratik, Vinita, you want to add anything?
No, no, you can continue.
So next, sorry, next slide. So
Okay.
just to give a geographical background, this is the Palghar district. It's just north of Mumbai. This map is actually made when the district was a whole district named Thane. Now the district is divided in two parts, and we are still in the northern, the tribal part near Dhanu, and yeah, that's where the cursor is right now. And so we uh, are so the whole district is kind of in four different regions, geographically four different regions. And what we observed while traveling and otherwise also is that each region had its own distinct architectural typology, and each of those typologies was being replaced by a lot of cement or standardized homes. Being architect, that was our trigger where we kind of decided to intervene and inquire about what was happening in the process of building in the district. That's when we came to the next image. Pratik, next image. So we found out a very, very interesting process of construction in the region. This actually image is of our village only, but such processes happen throughout the district. So this temple was being rebuilt, I think, on the second year of our practice. And what we were amazed by is how the temple was rebuilt. Like generally it takes a lot of money. If you see how these temple trusts work for something known as rebuilding or jeernoddhar of a temple, they take a lot of money, donations, etc., etc. But for these guys it was very easy, because they had set rules about how to rebuild this. For example, if you see the common rafters, they are like teak common rafters, which are branches of the main trunk of a small tree. So each and every family member of the village contributes, say, 5 teak common rafters to the temple, because they grow very freely in the farms of these people. When the temple is being constructed or rebuilt or repaired, it is a rule that every family of the village will send one family member to help in rebuilding the whole thing, and that whole labor is free of cost. Like, it's known as Shramadan in Maharashtra, where the labor is not, where people come and donate their labor to the whole process. Um, then things like plastering is done together with local material. Your roof mangrove tiles are also contributed for, and the temple was done almost in zero cost. Whatever important repairs were there, especially the roof. Then obviously there was a politician who provided for the tiles. You can see one person is holding a tile, and the um, wall paint, the whatever cement paint that is painted on it. We suggested an idea of doing a brick jali, and they kind of incorporated that in that temple. So the whole process was a collaborative process where the whole village came together and built this temple, and that was a trigger for us, and took us back into thinking the power of community and how tribal communities have been working. So the whole village solves very complicated issues which our cities have been thinking about, like, for example, resource management, forest management, firewood management, farming, labor management, very easily together as a community. Pratik, Vinita, you want to add anything?
Yeah, the reason for that is also the scale in which they function. So in cities, it is more centralized in nature, while when it comes down to a rural setting or a community, it's more decentralized, and hence it is better or manageable, I feel.
Hmm, hmm.
And also this particular process is reflect when they actually building their individual houses as well. For example, if somebody is like building a house, then in the by the surrounding houses there is one person come to help them, and they keep a record of it, how many people like came here for how many days to help me out. And accordingly, when the other people are building their houses, so the person who got all these free labor from the other people, he has to give back those labor. So it is a kind of a give and take relationship they are building with, and that's what makes this particular community very much stronger and very much interdependent.
And along with this, what is very interesting about this particular image is, like, if you see, most of them are the youngsters. Like, the younger generation takes part in the, like, they are the one who are the participants in the construction. So that is how the elder generation is kind of, holding down their learnings onto the younger generation, and it also provides an environment for the younger generation to bond with each other.
Nice. Oh yeah, so that's what some that thank you, Inna. That's something that I also missed. Where, for example, this is a traditional roof. So they redo one traditional entity of the temple almost every 5 years, so that every new younger generation gets to learn how to do that entity uh, afresh. So it's a way of also teaching, like she said. I think next slide we should. So yeah, so this whole context was kind of unfolding in front of us, and we were having a lot of troubles unlearning the things that we had already learned in college. So we would go to these people with maps and whatever, Google Earth images and stuff like that, and they would ask us, "Do you want alcohol? Do you want mangoes? Do you want chiku?" So we decided to change the way we documented the whole thing. So we documented it by going in their homes, eating food, going to their farms, helping them farm. And in the end, in our studio, the top right image is showing our studio back then. There was nothing. There were just brick piers with a roof. And in our studio we did make drawings, and we did make notes, but when we were documenting, we were just documenting stories of families. And it was like Vinita also said, the scale was very small, and so we could actually interact with each and every family of the village and find out what their story was. And we would go in their farms when they were farming. We would go some of us also went in the forest to kind of collect material for their construction. Some went to the forest with them to kind of take care of their animals. So that's how we kind of engaged with the community in a very different way of documenting the whole thing.
And also, this is a process of trust building with the community, because initially, when even though I belong to this particular village, my entire life went in a Mumbai. So when I shifted over there, there was some sort of a gap between, the people. People always thought that we are from the outside, and to actually uh, to do this particular trust building, this process was very important to get involved with the community in their daily activities.
Hmm. Put it like
Yeah.
so. We also traveled to other villages. A lot of examples of these things exist throughout our district and Maharashtra, and I'm sure they are there throughout the country. We have seen some outside Maharashtra also wherever we've traveled. We give examples to wherever we talk about how communities resolve complicated problems within themselves. So, for example, this particular village is in our district only. It's called Nageshwari Pada, and so this particular village is along a small pond, and it's on the coastal side of our district. And coastal side, if anybody is from the coast, then uh, groundwater is always saline, and that's when surface water, sweet water becomes like godsend. So the whole community, the whole village was nestled around this particular pond, which Pratik is highlighting in the PPT. So the whole pond was a resource which the community managed very well through the generation. So whenever it rained, the pond had water, it was full. Whenever when the rains went away, this pond had lotuses which the community kind of used to eat in the winters, the lotus roots. Uh, After the water even receded further, they kind of used to let their cows, their buffaloes go in the pond, and the buffaloes would shit there, trample the mud, and that was very good mud for construction. All the houses were wattle and daub. They are still wattle and daub. So that mud basically was very good for plastering those walls. Once the plaster was done, the rains came again. That was a summer activity. The rain came again, and the mud was washed off again into the pond. So that removal of mud is also very important in the aspect of desilting. That's also maintaining the pond. It's like something that we do in our cities all the time. And the reeds that grow on the banks of the pond were very important for construction, as they were used to make walls. So that was also one more resource that the pond was giving, and the whole community was using this very sustainably, so that there is no overuse, and there is also maintenance as a part of the community and as part of their activity. It was something that came natural to the community. So this is what we called as community ownership and community engagement towards a resource. Also community responsibility of not polluting, not spoiling, and not overusing the resource. So many villages like this gave us lessons of what we could uh, do with our community, which was at point like this, is still to some extent like this in some parts. Like for example, the temple that we mentioned, some ways or the other, the forest is also being maintained by our village somewhat in a somewhat similar way. But yeah, the younger generation now has individualistic aspirations because of whatever they are exposed to, and all these systems are kind of breaking apart, and that is leading to unsustainable development, according to us. Meantime, Pratik, if you want to add anything. Next slide.
Yeah.
Slide badal, Ari.
Mm.
So we kind of decided that okay, let's try and see what we can do with our community back in the village. In the meanwhile, I was giving my thesis, and my thesis was based in this particular village itself. uh, and my thesis model was lying in the village. So we kind of made the use of that, and we sort of took the model to the village square, and we started talking about what we can do as a community, and uh, what what problems are the community facing. And initially it was just me, Pratik. You can see Vineet over there with the sheets, and a couple of other people. But then slowly the entire village joined, especially the younger generation joined, and the discussion went into large tangents of roads not being okay, roofs not being okay, and farms not being infertile, forest not having firewood anymore, forest not having animals anymore. And we left the discussion at that, and we came back and to our office, and we that time used to play badminton, and we start playing it. And this whole young group of villagers came to us and decided that okay, we need to do something about our village, and that's when we started being a community. Ori, next slide if you want to say anything.
Yeah, so this is another process of participatory mapping, because these people over here, they know they have certain resources, but they never the whole perspective or the whole picture of this entire land holding, the how much resources they have, it is not there in front of their eyes, because they know where their land land is there. So this is mapping exercise where people started making a maps with whatever material available, like rangoli and every like the lime or something. So basically here they actually get the larger perspective of the entire village and whatever the resources they have. So this is another process which we did in one of the village where people put their houses there, they mark their farm, they mark all the water resources, and then also there is a lot of discussion happened where how we can take this particular water to the farm, and what how we should connect all this farmland together and have a common compound wall to protect it from the cattle grazing. All such idea came up when they actually saw their entire village like this. So this
So
is, yeah.
this is after like the process that we began with the community discussion is through the model, and this is the same community again. And by that time we had formed two community groups. They are called self-help groups of the people in the audience. I don't know if they are aware of them. Basically they are community groups which are formed to help each other. It's a government policy that provides them financial aid to do so. And but before we actually decided on what exactly we should be doing, it was very important to map our resources. And we, being like Pratik said, somebody who had studied in the village, could not gauge what resources we had to actually begin ideating intervention. So this is the process that we kind of chose to do. Vinita, or you want to add?
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
what emerged out of all of these discussions was a very interesting observation that we saw. Like these guys, they don't think of uh, home as like a four-walled structure. So, home is basically, or a structure or a building, is everything from the community to the forest to sun, sky, wind. Everything together is a home, and not just the four walls. So, developing or building a house is developing everything together. And if any of these entities fail, then the house also fails. So, for example, we would initially tell people to build wattle and dog structures under the Indira Awas Yojana or whatever. But people would say that there was no bamboo left in the forest, no cattle left. So how can we do all of these things? So we realized that architecture probably is like the ninth or 10th layer of a developed individual when an individual starts thinking about architecture. But what we were facing was a community which was thinking about basic issues like availability of bamboo, firewood, availability of economic resources, and availability of financial security, basically, and also availability of resource secure, like resource being secure around it in terms of fertile land, in terms of good forest, and in terms of food, basically. So this is what were the problems which needed to be addressed in the beginning. Only after all of these were resolved, probably we would have we thought back then that we would reach the problem of architecture. uh, Vinita, Pratik, you want to add?
Yeah. So this particular image, name called Ghar. Ghar means home. And this is a very famous Warli painting done by one of our friend called Srinath Jhirwa. And if you see when you tell them to draw a home, they never draw something which is only home. The surrounding is also drawn along with it. So this is what something which their interpretation about the home, and it is very important for us to understand this particular aspect, because as an architect, when we focus only on the built structure as a home, and that time we basically ignore a lot of the surrounding around us, and a lot of resources which are already there, and many other things. Like over here there are animals and the birds also part of the home, even the sun is a part of the home. So I think this is a very big learning for us also, for in our initial days, to understand the whole concept or the whole idea of the home.
Yeah,
Vinita,
and
anything?
Go on.
so this also works the other way, like I said, like where if one entity is failing, the home itself fails. Like imagine if your kitchen is not working, your fridge is not working, then your home, there will be something wrong with the house. So if those palm trees are not there, that means there will not be palm leaves to make the compound wall. In the painting, he's shown palm trees. If bamboo is not there, then there will be no bamboo to make the wattle and dog wall. So home is the ultimate aim of the whole ecological process, and that is what we got as learning through all of these interactions. And that is when we decided that, to intervene as an architect would be actually very stupid. We would have to actually intervene at a level of resource and finance, basically, and that itself is also architecture for us, because that ultimately leads to architecture. Can you go to the next slide, Ori? So a lot of discussions about how architecture should be, what is the resource, why it is falling short, everything took place. Again, the discussions would happen on the ground. People would draw on our foreheads. People would draw. So whatever was available, kind of. So these are two actually skilled masons who are talking to Prajakta, one of our friends, and they are explaining her how to make Adobe bricks, and very simply on the ground, very old skilled masons explaining it to Prajakta. Pratik, Vinita, unless you have to add something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is
Go on.
Yeah, so this is one of the photo from my this village only, and you can see the toy is made up of whatever the resources are available. So over here in our village, all the kids make their own toys. So sometimes you will also see a competition of a designing of these toys, and it is very interesting the way they actually design those toys. So over here, from the childhood only, they actually start understanding how to utilize the resources which are available over there rather than buying the resources. And I think that is a great example right now, the kind of toys they are making. And again, it is a same process which reflects when they are actually making their home.
So this was also an inspiration for us that, if we use local materials and local technologies for whatever intervention we do, from architecture to community intervention, that's when we will also engage more people of the community, and that will also lead to kind of having all of these resources conserved. So people used to conserve, tribals used to communitily conserve forests, because each and every entity of the forest was used. Like there were some species which would give clothing, like fiber, some species would give medicine, some species would give construction material, some species would give just shade. and some species were good for some animals to eat. Like for example, kumbha, there's a tree which is used considered as mango of bulls, so they would conserve that. So some species would give alcohol, obviously. So all of these species were conserved, but again the whole the wouldn't call it urban, but the monetized economy kind of focuses a lot on earning money, which is like the resource which is not connected to the forest at all. So that is when the forest became only a source of firewood, and all of these systems kind of broke down. So Pratik, if you want to add, or you can take the next slide.
Yeah.
So our first step was analyzing what we buy, and what kind of resource are we using, and what we as architecture office can do locally. So all of this is the stationery that we had, and we realized that 65% of that, all of it is bought from outside, and 65% of it is plastic. So that's when the thought came, okay, it could be better and could be replaced by something that these guys are doing. Ori, next slide. So we decided that, okay, let's start an initiative, and this was all in discussion with the community. Let's start an initiative wherein we look at traditional skills that these guys have, the dexterity and the creativity that these guys have, and utilize traditional materials so that we give a new use to that. For example, this particular image shows a fishing net. This is a tribal fishing net which is made out of bamboo, and these fishing nets now are obsolete. People don't use them because very few. So at a time it gives say 1 kg of fish or something like that. But where the nylon nets give a lot of fish. But at the same time, the nylon nets cause a lot of damage in the local water bodies, whereas these are harmless. Not only they are biodegradable, but they kind of are they are such that the small fishes escape out and only the edible ones trap in them, whereas the nylon ones trap everything. And the nylon ones tear and they go in the gut of the fishes that are existing in the whatever. Everybody knows how nylon nets are. So this particular wheel is known as a SATA, was our inspiration for our first product. So can you go next? So we kind of designed a lot of things with this is Sunil and Mohan. They were the first ones to come to us for a community intervention, and we kind of designed a lot of things with these guys. We still are in process of designing a lot of things, especially with Mohan, and with the traditional weaves that they have. Ori, Vinita, you want to add anything?
No. Replying to the chat actually.
And we okay. So, and we came up with our first product, which was a bamboo stationery pouch. I was the first one to use it. Mine is still functioning very well. There are many more products which we are making with these guys, or you just run through them. We have put very few, but you can find them on our Toker page, Instagram Toker bamboo product. And what is very interesting through the process, it's been 2 years that we are doing this now, is that apart from designing, which also is partly uh, managing of, so slowly we are giving off one arm. Initially I used to do a lot of accounting myself for the whole initiative. Then slowly Mohan took the accounting up. Initially Pratik used to kind of go to buy raw materials, whatever were required himself. Like for example, needle, thread, all of these things which are not locally available apart from the bamboo were to be bought from Mumbai, for which Pratik used to go. Then that also responsibility was given to them. Slowly we are building up the whole process where these guys take up the responsibility of their own business. And not only that, we are also moving into newer raw material. Like for example, these things are traditionally made, this is kalpesh basically, are made using palm leaves. and what he's holding. These are basically wall hangings that they have in their homes, and we are kind of now in the process of redesigning this particular weave and this particular module and seeing what products can be done. So more and more things like scroll is coming into the picture. We are doing a lot of uh, different kind of products that so this is a clutch, then there is a lamp, and we are now looking at not only making products with them but also planting, because this comes very naturally for them now. We have a limit of what we can do with local bamboo because that is a scarce resource. So
आवाज नहीं आ रही हम लोग को, तो हेग ने बोला लीव करके फिर से
विनीता म्यूट पे रख,
समझा नहीं।
विनीता म्यूट पे रख।
so yeah, so we are looking at a lot of different resources and not only utilizing the resource but also regrowing, and the regrowing is coming very naturally from the community itself. Mohan has planted some bamboo and many others are planting bamboo, though we are trying to develop systems of planting bamboo efficiently, which we don't have a clue about, so we are also researching in that. So that's our way of getting the resource back, not only for construction but also for livelihood, and that's our kind of solution to generate a livelihood based on local resource and local skill. This particular person is Gitesh. He is an artist himself. A lot of it is designed by this guy, and he is though not from our village but part of the initiative very much. Next.
Again, Nilesh and Kalpesh, who are like part of our designing team. Lakshman Dada, who is a weaving expert in our village, and he is the right now the oldest one in our village who has lot of skills. And now we are also trying to think like how we should pass on this particular knowledge to the next generation. So we are trying to make a lot of uh, uh, different things with the help of him.
Okay. So another thing that we are a part of is basically conservation of local seeds. A lot of native rice. So India had, I don't know how many rice varieties. Some say 400, some say 40,000. But our particular region had a lot of different native rice varieties which are used for different purposes. Like for pregnant ladies, um, they were different rice varieties. To have oil, like people also derived oil from rice bran, there were different varieties. For animals there were different varieties, and all of them are lost in the process of hybridization. I won't go into hybridization much, but we got into rice because one, we were doing ecological architecture, which in the western coast is not possible because it rains a lot, and we cannot do architecture in the rains, and also because the whole community does farming in the rain. So we also decided to do something with farming and with rice conservation, because everybody in the rains over here plants rice and everyone connects to the topic of rice very easily. So with the help of Bayef and Sanjay Patil, we kind of reintroduced some local species. We have successfully saved, I think, 5 species very successfully, and now are planning. We started off with 57, which came down to just 5 that we've been successfully able to save. That even Sanjay Patil or Bayef organization takes from our community now. And for that, we had to build a seed bank, and the seed bank basically uh, also is our office. So we also decided that we will have to rebuild our office. So this particular structure, all the 9 images are our office in construction. So our office is a place where our community initiatives happen. Like for example, if we get an order of say a large product, say 50 pouches or 60 pouches, everybody works together in one particular place. Initially that used to be the temple or somebody's veranda. We are planning to shift all of that activity to our office. There will be a seed bank here for all the seeds that we conserve now and in the future. And not only that, each wall of this particular structure, we decided that will be a different technique of doing wattle and daub. So our whole thing as a practice was also to upgrade the skill that was present locally in whichever village we build structures. So in this particular village, wattle and daub was the dominant technology, and we wanted to upgrade that to whatever aesthetic, functional problems that it had. It was viewed as a poor man's technology. Soundproofing नहीं होता, rat proofing नहीं होता, plaster अच्छे से नहीं होता उसके ऊपर, you have that bamboo texture, the plaster cracks. All of these complaints we decided to address through each wall that we were doing, so that the whole structure itself is an exhibit of wattle and daub. The process of building, bol, or you
Yes. So also the process of building it is with the there are a lot of students also involved in this process while making these particular walls. So and also there are a few villagers who are expert of making these particular bamboo walls or wattle and daub walls. They come as a mentor. So also there is a very nice give and take relationship which happens where whenever we experiment something, so we consult all these villagers, and they also give the advice, and with the amalgamation of all these processes, these particular walls are coming up. Also there is a lot of pride generation in that technology, because villagers also felt good that the people from the outside are coming over here to just to learn this particular technology from us. So right now also the faith in this particular technology is also getting restored in this particular village. Yeah.
or पुढे जा ना slide.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this is one wall that we were building with which we were trying to make soundproof. And this is Meena Tai explaining how to plaster wattle and daub traditionally. A lot of students come almost every winter, every weekend. There is a workshop here where people interact with us and with others. Now, from here, we would also like to take the audience to the next angle of our practice, which is doing architectural projects. So we have architectural projects in terms of community projects and private people who want to build with sustainable material. Through all our projects, the aim, if it is a community project, is to induce pride in the technology that they already have, and through private projects also experiment with the technology that we already have. Each village, each region has its own technology which is unique to it, and its own, not only technology, its own method of building also. Like for example, this particular structure is a forest food processing center which Pratik was building some time ago. When it is plastered, like I said, the whole community comes together to plaster the structure. And after the plaster is mud plaster basically. So after the whole thing is done, they play holi with the leftover material. So each structure, each village has its own tradition and technology, and both intermingle. And our aim through our projects is to kind of give new light to those things. Or if you want to add, or Vinita, if you want to add, you can add. Or go to the next
Yeah.
slide.
Yeah, Vinita. You're mute. You're mute.
Yeah. So this was one of the community, I won't say community project, it is one of the projects for a tribal farmer. And there was an IITian person who was involved with this whole initiative, so Mr. Deepak Gupte. And this particular, like it was a hand-holding exercise for the community or for the person who was building the house. The masons were absolutely unskilled, and what we had to achieve was, I won't say it is something very simple for them. With the raw skill set that we had, it was a great experience in itself. We had to stay in the village for a very long time. Over a period of say three months or so, we constructed this. And yeah, that's me on the top of the roof, telling them one of the joineries of all the four hip rafters which are going to come together. So it was a great experience in itself.
So basically, this particular project, the client was a tribal. The cost limitation was extremely low, and we had to actually interact at every stage with the village to come up with innovations to build the project. And Ori, can you go to the next slide?
Yeah.
So simple things in places like this, like say corbelling or the joinery that Vinita is showing, is basically having a hip rafter joint which does not involve any vertical members. So small things add to cost efficiency, and those are the things that add to the skill of the mason that is present over there. So in all this process, the mason is the central role, where whatever skills that particular mason has, the design is developed around those skills that are present in the region. So, for example, plaster here is all handmade. There is no trowel used. Like, there's no instrument used for plaster. That's for the simple reason that we wanted the tribal family to be able to maintain it very easily without having to spend on plaster later on. So it's a lime plaster only, but laid just by bare hands without any skill used for the plaster. Next. So yeah, this is what, so a lot of material has been reused from the existing house. The brick was made by the family itself. The labor was given by the family and the village together, and a lot of ideas came from the village, and a lot of material came from the family. Like cow dung came from their own cows. The wood came from their own trees, which their grandfather had planted. And like I said, the mud also came from their own field. So yeah, I think next slide. We'll run through this. So these are all our projects. So we just wanted to highlight what we have been, what have been the aims throughout our projects. For example, this is Ramesh Jadhav, known as Bua. He's my neighbor, and this was our first project, which was my house. So when we were building this house, both us and Bua were learning from each other. Bua told us how to lay bricks, and how it can be, how local bricks are to be treated with mud mortar. We taught him how to make arches. Or can you go to the next one? So he was initially scared of building mud arches. So were we. Again, Malak sir came to our guidance and assured us that nothing would happen. These arches are made out of complete mud mortar. They are still standing. Bua would not walk under these arches for several months after they were built because you were scared that they would fall. My parents would also not walk under them. But yeah, they are still standing. And the product of such interaction was my house, which is now the center of attention in the village. It's not a very good thing that it is, but it is so. Can you go to the next slide, Ori? So this is the central atrium, which Bua is very proud of. So at least I would say that what we succeeded in doing is generate pride in Bua, all the masons that were involved in their own technology. And the house was featured in a news channel, and the whole mason team was interviewed, and a lot of pride was generated through that. Next. Another very important person in the whole process of building my house was Ananta Mestri, who is here. And also on his right is Praveen, who was very important in building Pratik's house. Both these guys were attached, came into our team when structures were built as experiments were being done. Both are very good at their traditional joints, their traditional woodwork, but they are also very open to experiments. So with Ananta Mestri, we have done 4-5 projects where he was either fully or partially involved. And in each project, because of his openness of accepting new ideas, we could reinvent with whatever he knew. He knows a lot of simple and complex joineries. This image is actually one of our workshops where he's teaching the students joineries. Even we learn from him continuously. And at the same time, we use his knowledge in experimenting as well. Or can you go to the next image? So this is one of the projects that he was fully involved in, where, like I said, we did this joint where 5 or 6 members are coming together, 4 hip rafters, which are very important, one dormer ridge, and 3 common rafters. So 7 members are coming at one single joint without having any support from the bottom. And though he was initially skeptical of this, but he was very open to having ideated about it and how to build it. So the person on the ladder also is Ananta Mistry only. Next, this is that house, same house. It doesn't look like a traditional house at all. And again, this house, though from outside looks like a very standard village home, inside it's very different. The client came with the requirement of having no insects in the house, so that's why it is all protected from everywhere. You guys want to add? If no, then we can go to the.
Yeah.
Again, with a lot of courage, we kind of also tried to introduce timber frames, portal frames into the picture, an experiment to upgrade again local skills. And Vinita was experimenting with these timber frames. This is our recent project. And again, yeah, obviously, because it's an experiment, it has a few issues that we are facing, but it leads to like a different atmosphere. So basically, the local team, what Vinita realized, was not very much capable of executing this. So we kind of bought in our team that we always work with from our village to help the local team understand the joints. So we always work with local labor. And whenever it is required for guidance, we do get in teams that we have worked with previously, so that there is a better product and there's a better experiment. You can go to the next. This is also the first time that we were doing lime plaster uh, fully for a structure. And at that particular point of time, we did not even get somebody who has done lime plaster totally. Even we had not done lime plaster at that scale before. Vinita kind of executed the whole thing with online research and experimenting with the local team over there. Vinita, you want to talk about it?
I think we have to wind up in 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll run through it next. So this is an experiment in wattle and daub. We wanted to make a fully wattle and daub structure which does not look like the poor man's wattle and daub, and at the same time it had to be cost effective. So various things we tried, and again here the team was completely local. We did not. The aim was also to build with whatever team we had in the village. Next. So things like soundproof, rat-resistant wattle and daub plaster and wattle and daub walls were tried. This is Madhu Mestri. He's also local. He was also neighbor of this particular site, and he was very much open to experiments. And this is basically lime plaster with mud as a pigment and red oxide as a pigment being tried. Next. Or the next. Or Prati कुठे गेला?
I think so. There's a network issue.
Pratik stuck.
Or
I think Pratik is stuck. Okay, till then we can take some. I think I have a few questions for you. Maybe you can answer that while we wait for Pratik.
yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So I was wondering whether how does your practice work economically? Like, what are the different economic models that you all work with while working in these projects? Because most of them seem to be in rural areas and for clients who might not be able to afford an architectural fee. So if you can just elaborate a bit on that.
So like all of them are in the rural context, but not most of them are for clients who cannot afford fee. So we have different modules for different people that we work with. We kind of tried to diversify our module of asking for fees because we were looking at a very diverse clientele who
Oh
did
yeah,
not first of all
ये
understand
कौन
what an
सा?
architect is. So, so uh, we initially when we were working, we never worked pro bono. So for clients like Jagannath, like a tribal client, we have a different model. For communities, we have a different model, and for private clients who come as who want to build their own homes, we have a different module. And each of these is set upon the need and the paying capacity of each of these clients. For example, okay, the presentation is gone.
Yeah, Pratik will just be joining.
For example, uh, the tribal clients that we have dealt with, we've asked them things like you can pay us per day, whatever you pay a skilled mason, you can pay us that. So uh, by the end, the person ends up paying whatever percentage is appropriate, but in small bits which are very easily perceivable to that particular person. And for communities, we have done a module where we have taken money um, uh, in cash and in kind both. So we have taken money where we actually have taken money, and 50% the community has given rice or honey or whatever. And we've also done things where we go there for one site visit and we charge only for that site visit, and then how many ever site visits that we go for. Actually, there was one project in the later slides which we were talking about that particular module.
Right.
So, and for obviously the clients who are like private clients that work according to a percentage or a lump sum fee that we take. So it's a balance of all of these things that kind of support us as a practice.
Right. Okay. That's extremely interesting. So when it comes to these different types of initiatives like the seed bank and the bamboo products that you all are doing, are you like working towards generating some kind of livelihood among within the local communities, or is it not with that intent and you're just working with whatever you get in situ?
So the intent is to actually first generate livelihood. Uh, and the second most important intent is to generate that livelihood with the resource that is locally available. So, so like I was saying, like for example, Mohan, Sunil, and there's one more Sunil. There are two Sunils in the initiative, Nilesh, and now Vinod Dada and his son. All of these people had to sometime go outside the village to earn their basic needs. You know, after monsoon, all of these people have stopped going out of the village, which I think is a very good thing for us to learn from.
Right.
And that was the whole aim of the initiative. And though hopefully more and more as the initiative grows, hopefully more and more people find livelihood in the village itself. And also not livelihood, take ownership whole thing. Like for example, Mohan take complete ownership of the whole business right now. And that basically is what we are looking for, not just generating livelihood, because we of us can generate livelihoods only for probably three more people, but more and more if people start taking ownership of their own village and their community, the more it will lead to livelihood is what we believe.
We've actually got some questions from the audience. There's a question from Rupal. Rupal, do you want to unmute and just ask the question yourself? It might be more participatory.
Hi. I was just wondering, for projects which are not private, say interventions in the village in public spaces, do you also collaborate with the government, the local government maybe?
Okay, so I'll talk about again. There was a slide on this, but I'll talk about that. So it depends on how the project comes to us. Pratik can talk about his project, his community project. I'll first talk about the one that I'm currently doing. So yes, at some particular point of time, we have to collaborate with the government. Maybe not the government as a whole, though we've also done that with Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, but government as in terms of people, like for example, junior engineers who are on ground executing government schemes. Uh, Maharashtra has this thing called the CM Fellows, who are also active in villages. So we are collaborating with that. So I'm doing a community center with help of a CM fellow who is very active in one particular village in Gadchiroli district. And yeah, you cannot do community projects without government help, either in terms of aid or in terms of people, government people or government personnel or both. So Pratik, actually, you should talk about your experience also.
So basically, when we were working in Doyapada village, which is a community project, over there, the forest department was also involved in this particular project. And what used to happen that the funding was coming from the forest department, and there is one more organization called, which is local organization called Vayam, uh, who, with the help of Vayam, the villagers got forest right over around 150 hectares of forest, and this was the food processing center. So over here also there were like a lot of problem which happened in terms of the government collaboration, because government require everything on a paper, and this particular project was very very difficult for them to recognize as a project, because there was a lot of stakeholder which is involved. For example, the villagers, the architect, there is a YM organization. Also they need some structural audit, and the kind of they require a structural engineer certificate and all. So this was a non-conventional process. We wanted to make it a kind of a conventional, so the government can digest the whole idea of building it with the sweat equity and community. So there are a lot of problem which come across to identify the definition of the projects most of the time. And yeah, that is where our role comes into the picture, that how we basically facilitate this particular process, and then entire the project becomes more about the process of getting it done rather than the what is the final product which is coming out.
Yeah, and also I would also like to talk about very shortly about our experience of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, which was back then Indira Awas Yojana, wherein we were also experimenting a lot with government machinery as a whole, where we had to actually work with junior engineers of government, junior and senior engineers, to come up with new technologies which could be used in rural Maharashtra. And even then, like Pratik said, the problem is a lot of times not about what product comes out, but what the product will be called on paper. So, for example, we used local material to make the lintel, but then we had to get it audited, we had to get it tested, and all of that, and then it got approved. So a lot of processes are there, but if the personnel on ground is very good, if there are good junior engineers, if there are good government fellows, it's a very easy process. And I think that has to be done when we are doing community projects.
Yeah, actually, can I just ask everyone to switch on their videos so that it becomes a little more human, this process? And I think all of us are looking into our screens. You can just switch on your video. And we have more questions. Actually, I had one more question for you guys. Like most of you, I think most of y'all are working in your hometowns, but some of your projects are not in the village that you live in. So then in that case, how do you become a part of the community, or what is your first step in terms of familiarizing yourself with the community and community to you? Is that an easy process, or does it, like, how do you go about it? What's your approach?
Uh, okay, I'll answer first. It's very project defined how we approach a village. If the project is a community project, then we have to have interaction sessions with your with the village, with the whole community, understand what the community is wanting. I think most of our time goes into doing that rather than designing. The village that I am stuck in right now, the interaction happens through work. So initial days of design, we actually, whenever we go to a new village, we go hunting for skilled masons in the village, and that's the skilled mason is our kind of point of contact for uh, for the village. So once we have that point of contact, more and more people come in touch. Like for example, what I'm doing right now is building a vault, which used to be a technology here. It was called Ladni in Marathi. But for various reasons, because it used to be a stone vault initially. For stone, the art of making stone vaults died out because stone was not available. Masons were not available. It became very costly to build it. So we decided to build a brick vault over here. Again, the picture was there in the presentation, but it's not there. So a lot of people come to see what the vault is being made and how it is being made, and that is our interaction with the village. And the mason itself describing the whole vault, how it is made, what was the entity, becomes sort of a very happy point for us. The masons get their family to see the village, to the vault and the structure that is being built. And that happens with almost all structures, because there's something new that's happening with whatever they knew initially. That's how we interact when we are doing private projects, because that's not when we want to get into community development, because design takes over. But when we are doing community projects, it's the other way around, because we interact more with the community and the design happens probably in 2 or 3 days.
Hello.
Rashik's got a
Yeah,
question.
my question to Design Jatra, like when you're working in particular, context where you are the designer and you are also the contractor and you are dealing with all the agency means the labors and everything. So like in particular time you are only able to doing like one particular project at the time. So like how you are thinking to expand yourself, like in future how you want to do more projects at a time.
Struggling with that. So we do have a limit of the amount of projects that we take in one go. And so at Max, for example, we also have a constraint because of the materials. Like I would say, because it is mud, so we have a particular timeline in place before which we move that particular structure. And in my experience, I would say, in one season, I can take care of say 3,000 square feet of an area. So if I start in September or October somewhere, I can happily manage to roof it up before the monsoons. So that is one of the things that we face because of the materials that we. Apart from that, I would say the kind of work that not something which is very conventional in nature, and hence, in spite of heavily supervising the work, it becomes very difficult to be in all these remote places in one. So it's kind of like we try to manage. So most of the times we are there on site, or somebody from our site as a site supervisor is always present. So yeah, we do have a limitation of
Yeah.
time. So it's not very easy, this question as to how we would want to expand the time. Let's see.
So yeah, like I mean you have someone who like also managing things. Like it's very
Yes,
difficult
yes,
to like to resource the
of
materials and
course.
also yeah.
Yeah, so we have come down to a place where
So
we Yeah, we tell the clients to arrange for a site supervisor from their side, while we have our architectural supervisor from our side. And the client side supervisor is the one who takes care of arranging the material labor that we ask for. So that is one thing that we have like evolved onto. So it's more like we are not the contractors. Like, at least personally, I wouldn't want to get into the shoes of a contractor, because there's kind of this, this uneasiness with the client that maybe he's taking a cut or somewhere, which is what
Yeah.
still, it just strains the whole relationship. So what we do is we just do the supervision part of it, and the client takes care of the material and the labor part of it.
Thank you.
We've got a question from Rajshri. So Rajshri, I've unmuted you. You can
Okay. So I'd asked something similar in the chat, but like the concept of home is very different in villages and cities. So of course the design approach we take is also very different. And in villages there is more of presence of vernacular techniques to design something, and also an increased sense of community. But if we try to take the same participatory approach in cities as architects, what can we do to design more closely to the context, and involve more people in the design process, knowing that there is a lesser sense of community in these cities?
Vinita, should I answer?
Yeah.
So yeah, we get asked this question almost in every presentation that we do, but the answer to that is participation without community is not possible. So I used to work in a firm called URBZ, which does participatory design in cities, but it does in places like Dharavi. I wouldn't call it a slum, but places where there is already an existing community. And for participation, you need to be a community. You need, I mean, not a community which probably stays together, but say for example, if 10 people are concerned about sparrow population in their city, then those 10 people coming together and doing an intervention for the sparrow is also a community intervention. So it's very important to recognize what urban communities are. We have not done that yet because we have not actually worked with urban communities, but I'm sure there are urban communities which have intentions which match with each other. And all those people, what needs to be done is one facilitator. It doesn't need to be an architect. One facilitator who gets all of them together and tries to find solution to the intent that the community has. So right now in cities, what's happening is my intention is very different from what my neighbor's intention is. So we are not a community together. But I'm sure that, like I said, like there'll be 10 people who care about, say, stray dogs. There'll be 10 people who care about urban forests. There'll be 10 people who care about growing rat population or whatever. And that's how. But the precursor for participation is community, and it cannot be avoided.
Thanks for that, Shardul. We got a question from Harsh. Harsh, are you? Yeah, you're unmuted. You can go ahead.
So my question is to the whole Design Jatra team. So it's kind of I'm facing an identity crisis over here. I want to start practicing in the rural area, but I'm not connected to the roots. Like from Uttar Pradesh, but I've been brought up in Mumbai and connection with it. So you guys had some cultural connection. You had some connection to your. That's how you guys started. So as a fresh graduate, I want to do my career, pursue my. How should I go about it?
Okay, Harsh, I would want to answer to you the project where we were working for the tribal farmer. So IITian fellow, Mr. Deepak Gupte. So he had a similar situation to you. Like, he did not know anybody from that village. he wanted to get into the village. And what he did was he put in 2 years of trust building as an initiative to just, break grounds with them. So he used to come there every weekend, or say 2 days a week or 3 days a week. He used to simply stroll around and caught people's attention. And then people started inquiring as to what he wants and who he is, and so it just started an interaction session within themselves, and that is where he revealed his intentions of how he wants to help in some way, but then he does not know how to start or where to start. And yes, trust building is the first thing if you want to engage in a community. And it is not a process which is going to be, like in a snap of a finger. So it is not going to be fast. It is going to take time. So are you ready to put in that much? Like, it's an investment and it's a long-term investment. So if you're prepared for it, then go for it.
I
Also
always,
in this, sorry, yeah, Shardul.
okay, I'll say. So I would suggest, Harsh, that read a lot of books about how you can engage with community. That's how I got inspired to work on whatever I am working right now. I would suggest some books. There is Small Change, karke one book is there by Nabil Hamdi. I suggest this book to everyone because it's an architect who's talking about participatory development. So for architects, it becomes very easy to understand that book. There is also a book in Marathi called Melghatavaril Mohar. I don't know whether you can read Marathi or what, I don't know, but there will be a very good, like she's saying, so this particular person, he also did not have roots in the tribal village that he's working on, and he just decided to travel a lot. And in his travel, he decided that this particular village is the village that I'm going to work with. He started going over there every weekend. He was a doctor, so he started treating people, and that's how he started interacting with people. And this particular person, his name is Vinay Kolle. He then settled over there, and not just like us, like realized that medicine is probably 10th thing to think about. Village was lacking in many basic communities. Started working on farming, on construction, on clothing, and different aspects of life. His wife also started working with him. And like Vinita also said that when you are entering into such realms of, say, community, don't think of yourself as an architect, is what I would also suggest. Like, think of yourself as a facilitator to whatever the community is talking about. So you have to be a very good listener, and you have to process all that data and join the dots. I think that is very important. But since you have, also very important is the whole identity crisis thing that you said. I would suggest that till you find an identity or you find the context that you want to work with, you keep reading and you keep traveling. And I'm sure you'll find something or the other. If nothing, then you can visit our office anytime and we can discuss.
That's amazing.
Thank
Great.
you so much.
I hope you got your answer, Harsh.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
So we've also got a question from Kaushal. Kaushal, I'm going to unmute you. Are you on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Your work is really inspiring. And
Thank you.
my question is, what do you think the role of architectural education should be after going through this process of being educated in a particular system of like undergoing through architecture and now practicing in other ways? It's more of going to fields and beyond studios, and it's more of being an individual. The journey seems like that. But where do you think architecture, the education should play a role, or in what way? Do you think?
Okay, I think I can. Basically, when I met like a lot of visionary educators and having the idea, and there are a lot of discussions also happen on this particular thing. And also I'm a visiting professor in two colleges in Mumbai. Uh, See that everybody has like very different kind of ideas about how the architecture education should be, because it is such a vast topic and it is all over scattered in all the directions. And when we are actually focusing only on this one particular direction, and it itself such a big vast field, I think the incorporation, before incorporating anything in this particular in the standardized education system, we also need to understand the interest of the student. Okay, like there are a handful of, for example, for us, also the Malak sir was the person who introduced us to this particular field. Okay, and also there are a lot of rest of the faculties who are like talking about urbanism, or the kind of a minimalistic architecture or the brutalist kind of architecture or something like that. This is something which is we were inclined of, and we understood, okay, this is something which is very interesting for us, and I think we simply went in that particular direction. And also, so what we realized, that a lot of education also happened, like architecture education actually put the base where we start the very basic thing, which is we start questioning things. And when the process of started searching the answers, this entire journey took a one particular line. Right now there are a lot of electives, introduction of this such particular topics through the electives, and there are a lot of guest lectures happens, and all these things. So college are trying about it, but I would say if we focus only on this particular thing, then also it is not fair. And I think there is also should happen, rather than force, it should be a kind of a interest which should take me towards this particular line. Yeah, anything, Shardul, Vinita?
Yeah, I would want to say that it's very like in architectural education, as Prateek said, I agree to it, where you get to question a lot. You should be able to question things, and the primary goal should be to expose yourself to the maximum. The more the exposure you have in these 5 years, I think you are more grounded in order to take a better step towards what you are inclined towards. So you can make better choices for yourself if you have a better exposure during these 5 years.
I think that's great advice. All of us have been struggling with that. Do we have any more questions? I mean, it's very informal, so you guys can ask whatever you feel like.
I have a question.
Huh.
Yeah, so it's not exactly related to your practice, but I'm assuming I can sense the amount of sensitivity that you all come from, and it definitely reflects in your practice. So my question is, with the current pandemic scenario, urbanites today are also realizing the need for more and more self-sufficient and sensitive communities. So some of these will attempt to build these communities in the cities, while some young urban population will also consider moving to the rural to build these smaller communities. So, what would it mean? That would also mean that a lot of new build spaces will start occurring in the rural. So, in such a scenario, what do you think would be the role of the sort of post-COVID architect?
Heavy question. I would want to attempt to answer it. I just hope that because of the COVID scenario, the rural is not pressurized, and even if people want to move into the whole scene, they don't forget why the whole COVID thing has happened in the first place. And when they move into a rural scenario, they are more aware about the rural scenario before they move into it, because it's very different to be here. And we ourselves, even though we had no intentions of disrupting any community life here, took almost 2 years to adjust ourselves to it, and I think we are still not. At least I am not. Pratik is fully adjusted, but I am not fully adjusted to this lifestyle yet. And hope
I
that
would say to
people take their
romanticize.
decision.
Sorry, go on.
Yes, yes. I hope that they don't come out of this romanticized idea of an ideal rural living, and that's where our client selection also comes into place, because a lot of people come to us almost every month. There are new inquiries for projects which are based on some romanticized ideas of mud home. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that people realize why the whole pandemic in the first place has happened, because of nature's disruption, and be very sensitive towards um, building if they intend to build in the rural scenario. And if in case they do decide to build in the rural scenario, I hope the architects are sensitive enough to kind of build in the rural scenario once this COVID happens. I don't know what will happen after that.
Yeah, about this question, I also feel that it would be a bit rash of a decision, because it's more like there's an action and then we would want to react to it. So there won't be any time or space to let things evolve. Like the best decisions or the best things happen when there is a good amount of time and a particular place where people get to evolve. So change and evolution are two very different things. So if because of COVID, people are going to react, that would be like a change that we might not be able to handle so well. But if we just are a bit slow in, just taking the whole thing and maybe evolving solutions from this, like we take this as a learning and then we evolve certain solutions out of it, which should be a long term thing, not like an action is there and now we have to react something to it. So it should not be a rash decision is what I feel. So we should give it some time.
Yep.
Yeah, I
Also,
mean, yeah,
sorry.
sorry.
Yeah. So when I was also going through a lot of architects' videos and their write-ups in this COVID situation, all this pandemic situation has some sort of an impact on the architecture of it in terms of even if you see the kind of urban planning. Where people actually think about all this, situation, and there are a lot of things. It is always like some pros and cons about all this planning and everything. But yeah, Vinita is rightly said that what is the architect's reaction which matters a lot. And also what happens that there are a lot of people right now, it will be a kind of a panic buying lands in the rural areas, and they actually, there will be a lot of impact in the rural economy as well as the resources, as well as when the people are not actually involved with the surrounding community and they wanted to build something over there, and then again there are a lot of problems happens that community is not accepting those people, even though they have a land or something like that over there. And then there are a lot of struggle which happens, where the friction which happens, and somehow architects needs to understand all these situations and what is happening, like individually. For example, there are many clients who are initially a few of our clients who are actually involved first with the community. They have enough trust building with the community, and then they went for an architectural intervention like the house for themselves. And I think this something, counseling of the client, which is something which is the first step which architects we have to take, and we need to explain them the situation, like what first they need to do rather than just building a house over there.
Yeah,
Um,
sorry.
how much?
So basically, this question is obviously it's nothing. It's not something that we can like immediately come to a conclusion on. So it's just more to like just open out a discussion also. So even if anybody else wants to take a shot at it, anybody in the audience.
Actually, since Shardul mentioned that you, Pratik and himself have you guys have moved from Mumbai city to a rural area. I want to ask you what has been, like what are the gaps?
I like to correct. I have not moved from Mumbai city. I
Okay.
still am living like a 50-50 life, where I am half of my week in my village and half of my week in the city. And Pratik has, yes, moved with his family into a village. I still have not been able to do that change. Neither has Vinita. So, though we all more than half of the week, like this whole COVID scenario, since 2 months now, I am in a village, but it's not so that I have moved completely off the city. My family still lives there.
Right.
Yeah, can answer.
Yeah. So, but even though you're living 50-50, I'm sure like you would be able to see certain gaps or let's say the struggle of a rural community to sustain with such an urban kind of free around it. Especially when it comes to large infrastructure projects which might threaten the area, or even smaller things like educational facilities, healthcare facilities. So, what do you think are what is really required currently in these setups around Palghar, and how do you think we can, or you living there, especially Pratik, since you're imagining to live there even in the future, you can build up an ecosystem where these younger generation continue to want or have an incentive to continue to live there rather than move to cities.
Are you pointing at a generation of employment within the rural areas so that they don't migrate to the urban?
Not just generation of employment, but also in terms of like facilities, healthcare facilities, educational facilities. Like these are some things which are not available in rural areas, which is why a lot of younger generation moves to the urban areas for better education. So
I
do you
think
that
the primary reason of the migration is the economics, and also not only economics but also the dilapidation of the resources. For example, the resources for the living, like over here, like the jal, jungle, zameen, and these three resources. For example, if you have a water, if you have a jungle, and if you have a land, these three resources can easily, you can survive with these three resources. But again, right now we are in the economic cycle which we cannot go back right now, because we are so far ahead and it's now the part of our evolution, and it's very difficult to come out of this economic cycle. And it also has a lot of impact that cities sucking all the resources from the neighboring villages, and because there is a depletion of the resources, the local people are moving towards, they are migrating to the cities. So the economic is a big the plays role, a big role in this particular situation. Now if we think about this reverse migration, so we also need to understand that there are certain things which where we need to identify the decentralization processes. For example, uh, we work with this WAYAM organization, and that WAYAM organization only what they do is they just make people aware about their rights. Okay, and that is how they got the forest right. That is how they actually started working on this Paisak Act, and because of these particular acts, they started generating a lot of resource as well as the employment, and some sort of a the opportunities to where the village will become a livable area, and there will be a strong community network within the village. And but also the new generation has mobile in their hands, so they need to earn a certain amount of money. So we also need to think about what is the balance, like what exactly we need, and where we want the decentralization as well as where we want the centralization process. And I think this is a very I would say there is no single answer where we say this particular process we do and this migration will stop. It will never stop like that. So it is always an evolving process, where because every village has its own thinking process, its own the way of working. And this particular has a lot of impact of geography, the water resources, the kind of food they eat, and all these impacts actually make the mind of the village. So understanding this particular mind and then taking a lot of the actions in this particular village is very important. And that's why we need a facilitator who can actually think, who can go there, and this has to have a decentralized process where no one person is not addressing everything, but a lot of few people who are distributed, and they are understanding that particular community better, and they are responding to this all the problems like migration and everything.
Right. So have you experienced, I mean, like, let's say if there were, have you experienced a time when there is a larger infrastructure project which threatens these areas, and who is it, who is like the facilitator that you're mentioning that comes up and is like, where do you think the power lies and how do you think it can
For example, in our Dhanu region, when there are a lot of dam projects were coming about, came up, there was one organization called Kashtakari Sanghatna who actually stand against it. But they were like like they are activist organization, but also that why we like their working style, because they came up with a PESA Act, which laws which gives a lot of power to the community. As a community form their own gram panchayat, and they take all these decision whether to what to do with their land, and then the government is become the second stakeholder who asks a lot of permission from that village community rather than asking from one particular person like sarpanch or something like that. So that act is formed really well. If you read that particular act, PESA Act, it has a really beautifully drafted particular act. Also, this Forest Right Act, which came through the Meghat, there is one village called Mendalekha. And when the Forest Right Act came, there were a lot of paper industries were forming in the Chandrapur and Gadchiroli district, and they used to cut all the bamboos from the forest and they used to take it. So the villagers come together and they started fighting against it, and then after that government recognized their efforts and they come up with the act called this Forest Right Act, where the community own the forest and other people has to take permission whenever they are taking any kind of a resource from their forest. So I think this has to have some sort of a balance where the lawyers are also required, and if let's say single lawyer who is take the responsibility of one village and try to address, or the architect who is trying to address, everybody, like all we professional, we can actually question our working and whatever the knowledge we have, and how we can actually be useful in these small areas. And when we take the responsibility of the small area or the small group of people, it is very easy to take the steps, and then we can have a hand holding together.
Right. So the village. Sorry, Shaldo, continue.
Like to answer this question, a lot of us are weary about activism and standing up for whatever we think is wrong. For example, maybe we are not weary, we just don't have time for it, or we are very busy with our work. But I personally believe that now is the time when it's very scary how laws are passed, that we need to actually look at community activism as a mode of development. By activism, I don't mean that going for rallies and holding placards, but talking about community problems and talking about big infrastructure projects which are affecting communities as a whole, and trying to find your role and participating in them, according to me, is very important, because in the activism realm and in the community development realm, there are very few professionals, and there are even fewer architects, and it needs to be monitored. Laws need to be made participatorily, asking people for what they need, and infrastructure projects at the same time need to be proposed by consultation of people, according to me at least. So yeah, and for that I think professionals need to come out of their offices and need to speak up about how laws are made and how their communities are affected. Even if you stand up for, like I said, like 10 people come together and talk about sparrows, I think it will be a good thing. So whatever affects us, we need to speak about it not only on social media, but also apart from that, we need to do something about it. That is what makes us community.
Right. Yeah. Right. Anyone else? Any more questions we have? And otherwise, we can just wrap up. I think no more questions. So great. It was great to have you guys. I mean, it was really nice presentation, and I think all of us learned something from it, like whether it was to do with building construction and techniques or community participation and activism. So I'd like to wrap up. Everyone who's come and participated, thank you for that. You can keep in touch with us and Design Jatra. They've got their own page. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact them. I hope that's fine. And for Compartment Escort also, you can keep in touch with the next FNC. We'll be having it next Friday. And as Aman already pointed out in the beginning, we'll be coming out with a publication on housing. This was a compilation of a series of FNCs we had on housing, very much close to the idea of a home that we discussed today also. So thank you. Thanks, Vinita, Shardul, Prateek. We struggled with the internet.
Thank you
Thank
guys.
you for having us here.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye.
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 Bye.